Hello and welcome to Insights with me, Lynne O'Donnell. My guest today is Amin Karim. He's been involved in politics in Afghanistan for decades in many guises. He was probably the first person to enter Afghanistan after the collapse of the Republic in August 2021, when he and his daughter walked across the Friendship Bridge from Uzbekistan. He's been in and out of the country since then, trying to work with the Taliban to bring peace, stability, growth and inclusivity. He did it a couple of years ago with a detailed proposal that won acceptance from many in the international community, but not the Taliban. Now he's at it again. Have a listen. Amin Karim, thank you for talking with me today. We met in Kabul in early 2016 when you were negotiating with the government of Ashraf Ghani for the return to Afghanistan of Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, the leader of the Hisb Islami party, who you worked with for some time. I wonder if you would mind introducing yourself with some details of your background and your involvement with Hisb Islami and Gulbuddin Hekmatyar.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Well, thank you very much, Lynne, for giving me this opportunity. My name is Muhammad Amin Karim. I was born in a middle-class family in Kabul and grew up there and studied in a high school, French high school. And then in 1978, 2 weeks after the communist coup in Kabul, I escaped the regime, and I've been established in France for since this time. I've studied architecture and sociology, and I was involved during all this time since 1975 in a political fight for the sake of our people. Do remember that at that time in this underdeveloped country, there was only one option for the people who wanted to change situation in their country. The most important movement was the communist groups, pro-Soviet Soviet Union or pro-Maoist Chinese group, and there was no other alternatives. But 2-3 things brought me to the politics and determined my whole life. The first one was the situation of my country, which was one of the most underdeveloped country in the world. And my father was going every year to Germany, making business. My brother was studying in Germany. And the news that I had from them about the other countries, remember there was no TV, no radio, no nothing to be informed of what's going on in the entire world. And it was giving me the possibility of comparing the situation of my country and the rest of the world, especially the Western country, why we are so underdeveloped. And that was one of the things that brought me to think about the situation. And the war, 1967 war on Palestine, and especially the draft of the 70s in Afghanistan, which the King Zahir was denying the existence of such a draft. All these things shocked me and brought me to be active and to work to change the situation. And at the same time, there was the unique movement who was not communist in the city, was the Islamist group of young Muslim students, led by Mr. Gulbuddin Hekmatyar and his friends. And after 2 years of reflection, I start to collaborate with them, and since 1975, I was a member of this movement. You know that up to 1979, there was no other political party in Afghanistan except the communists. The other political party has been created outside the country with the help of the country we are where you are established right now, and also the United States, who started helping the Afghan Mujahideen after the Soviet Union invasion of our country. And, at that time, up to 1950, 85, Hizb Islami was well supported by all three countries in the war. And its name was Group of Freedom Fighters. So Hizb Islami was the most important, if not the unique, efficient movement who was fighting against Soviet Union and had a program of social justice, a lawful government, and a regime ruled by the moral ideas. I mean, by the justice, by freedom, by lawful government. These are what the values that was very attractive for me and for millions of young Afghan, especially educated Afghan people. And that was the most well structured and less corrupted, if not corrupted, political and military movement who was fighting against the Soviet Union at that time. Those were the reason why I came to the politics and why I became a militant of this movement at that time. Uh, after all, after 50 years of militancy, I know that since we worked, since we acted in the scene of the society, we committed, uh, this party committed a lot of mistakes. And that's also true, but it's true that after 85, 1985, when Mr. Hikmatyar came to United States, invited by the United Nations, and since he refused to meet Mr. Reagan, the president at that time of United States, the hostility starts against Hizb Islami, and it's become a non-welcome movement in the United States and in all Western countries. If you heard Mr. Mark Siegman, the representative of CIA from 1985 to 1988 for Afghanistan, he said after this time he came to Afghanistan for the unique reason how to fight Islamic Afghanistan. That was time that we were harshly fighting against Soviet Union presence in our country. But from this time, unfortunately, Hizb Islami became almost an enemy of some Western countries. In 1989, when the collapse of the Soviet Union starts, I heard Mr. Manfred Werner, Secretary General of NATO, being asked why NATO should continue to exist since the Warsaw Camp is collapsed. And he said, from now on, our enemy will be the Islamist group and the National Liberation Group. So that's why we should continue our fight.
After you mentioned that Hizb Islami became non grata, I guess is a way of putting it. And
Yes.
then you successfully negotiated Gulbuddin Hekmatyar's return to Kabul. You tried earlier under the Karzai, you negotiated with the Karzai government. And then when we met, you were approaching the Ghani government, and that was successful. Hekmatyar was able to return to Afghanistan later in 2016. I'm sure you know his reputation among many Afghan people. Some call him the butcher of Kabul. and that's a reputation that he carries to this day. What impact do you think that that move by Ghani in welcoming him back had on the political landscape in Afghanistan in 2016? It was said at the time that then President Ghani was hoping that this could be a template for the Republic's relationship in the future with the Taliban. It didn't quite work out like that. What impact do you think it did have?
Well, in the very first day of 9/11, I had a meeting with friends here in France, and I said United States will invade Afghanistan, and if it's give the Afghan people food insecurity, there will be no resistance, since the Afghan people is tired of fighting since decades. But unfortunately, the United States came for a vengeance, and that created a situation that the most of Afghan villager was obliged to somehow pushed to resist in the killing of civilian, and that created the situation of what we were scared of, a new resistance. And it started by Hisb Islami at the first up to 2005. And at that time, we were convinced that there will be no solution. We are facing a stalemate, and the United States will not defeat this resistance, knowing the Afghan people tradition and values. And we should find a win-win solution, because we were in a lose-lose solution for Afghan people and for the international communities. In 2007, I proposed a peace deal to the Western countries, to our president, Mr. Sarkozy, and to UK Prime Minister in the United States. And the answer I received in 2007 from Mr. Sarkozy was, the defeat is not an option. When I was talking about the peace solution, where through peace negotiation, the international community forces should withdraw from Afghanistan by creating a provisional administration in the country, and to holding a election after 6 or 1 year, in order to allow the Afghan people to choose their own destinies. At that time, unfortunately, there was a very negative answer from all Western countries that I received. And but I didn't despair. I continued this way. I created a forum of peace and freedom for Afghanistan, and I worked with Hisb Islami's leadership to convince them to come to the negotiation table. Since we were not against the Afghan people, we were not fighting the Afghan government. We never fought against the Afghan soldiers or policemen. We were only fighting the foreign occupation. So why not to discuss with the Afghan government? The Hisb Islami leadership accepted my proposal, and I started working since 2010. At that time, unfortunately, when I was in Kabul negotiating with Mr. Karzai about the peace process, the solution I was submitted to him, Mr. Robert Gates came to Kabul and said, we will kill all fighters. There is no moderate, there is no extremist. We will kill all Taliban and Hisb Islami people. That was continuing up to 2011. But at that time, since Obama came to the power, he started accepting the idea of peace, especially the meeting of Lisbon in Portugal, where he announced that the United States military forces will withdraw from Afghanistan at the end of 2016. That was the beginning of hope, and we tried negotiating with the Afghan government through 3 years, difficult negotiation, and our idea was to bring also Taliban after that. I was in touch with some of their leaders. They were saying, okay, let's test your effort, your negotiation, what it will give to us, then we are ready to come. Unfortunately, since Mr. Ashraf Ghani wanted to stay in the power for many years, he rejected all proposals that I made to him. He did not fulfill one of our treaties articles about we had a treaty with 25 articles. He just fulfilled one of them. That was the comeback of Mr. Hekmatyar. And at that time, Taliban said, we will not negotiate with this regime. And unfortunately, we had the Doha Treaty, which we supported. But the terms of this treaty was announcing what we witnessed in 2021, the collapse of the regime in a very awful process. And we lost all of our hopes to have a stable, lawful, free, independent country since the signature of 2000 of the Doha Treaty.
Yeah, indeed. You went back to Afghanistan, as I recall, with your daughter very soon after Ashraf Ghani's government and the republic collapsed. I think you told me that you were the first, you and your daughter were the first people to enter the country when the flow of humanity at that time, we have the awful memories of what happened in the weeks after the August 15 collapse, to re-enter. Humanity was going one way, and you and your daughter were going the other. You crossed the friendship bridge, I think, through Uzbekistan to get back in. What did you find? I do recall that sometimes when you were there, you and I would have telephone conversations, and you were almost abject with despair about this, about what was going on and what you found there, and what Afghan people were having to deal with. Can you go into some detail and describe your impressions, let's say, in the first 6 months of the Taliban entity?
The most important thing for me and my daughter was to face a situation with no war after 45 years of struggle and violence in our country, and to start a new life with the security for the people and freedom. And that's why we came back to Afghanistan through a very difficult way, as you mentioned. And yes, we were happy that the occupation was ended, the war was over, the very, very corrupted regime collapsed, and the island of power, kind of feudalism of political power, ended in our country. So that was the very positive points. But our expectation was at the same time to have now to start a new life with the stability in our country, with a lawful regime. We had the security. And we still have this kind of physical security. Of course, security means a lot of things, but I'm talking only about physical security at that time. But very soon, unfortunately, we saw that this movement want to have the absolute exclusivity of all aspects of life of this country. In many ways, it's only one political party. It's a one political party's rule in this country. One absolute exclusivity of gender in the power in the system. Exclusivity of interpretation of the religion. Most important thing. They believe that they are the unique people to have the right to interpret the religion. The absolute exclusivity of villager ruling this country, and unfortunately, what we was scared of happened, which was this fight of tradition against the modernity. This is the rule of a group of villagers who consider that all aspect of modernity is against Islam and they should fight it. Beginning with the girls and women situation, their rights, with the all educated people are considered as a non-Muslim or not a good Muslim, so they have to fight them. And this is the rule of madrasas people. In the madrasa, you learn something and you repeat it. And the difference of, for example, with Hisb Islam is that you read the Quran to understand it. When you start to understand, you are asking question. And this is the difference. Now we lost a lot of our hopes from that time. In Afghanistan, it's now you have a situation of what becomes you may saw in Soviet Union or maybe in North Korean country, which means that everything should be under the control of this de facto government. I know that most of the responsible of this group, especially who have lived outside the country, in Doha, have a different point of view. But a minority, a powerful minority circle established in Kandahar is ruling the country, even if the majority of the responsible are not agreeing with this policy, but they have the power, the circle, and they are imposing their point of view in our country, in our society.
Mm. Um, we're getting close to the 3-year mark now. Have you seen any improvements, any changes, or is the situation becoming more and more tightly controlled by the Kandahar group?
Rather, this second option, unfortunately. In the belief of Taliban group, you should follow the order of number one, which is, in my point of view, is not Islamic belief, but this is their belief in the group of Kandahar is imposing their point of view. Sometimes I'm asking myself if the isolation of Afghanistan is not wished and wanted by this group in order to have the free hand. I know that the Kabul people from this regime are mostly opposed to the ban of education for girls. They are open for some freedom of speech. They are pushing the existence, the work of political pluralism, which is not allowed by the Circle of Kandahar. I don't know if there would be a fight, peaceful or violent fight, to change the situation from inside. But what is absolutely sure is that without the international community support, the situation in Afghanistan will become more and more difficult and more dark to live in this country. This is the
Indeed.
situation.
Well, what do you do? I know that you've had an advisory role. You've been involved in formulating budgets for the Taliban regime. You've put together, I remember you telling me, a committee of patriots, I guess we could call them, people who have played senior roles in governance in the past and have had a voice in the past. Can you describe what it is that you're doing and what you hope to achieve? You go back and forth between your home in France and your home in Kabul in the hope, I believe, of making some positive difference. So can you explain what it is that you do?
The most important thing is that we are in front of two de facto governments. The one is known under the Taliban Emirates, and the second is UNAMA, UN, who at the all ministries, education, economy, refugees, anti-drug, and they are working very separately. Since the regime is not recognized by the international community, there is no enough connection between UNAMA works and the de facto regime. I try to work as a bridge between these two identity with a circle of Afghan well-known and committed people who are living still in this country, not the most ruler of the previous regime, but the Afghan intellectuals like Mahbouba Saraj or Dr. Faiz Alam or people, Dr. Jafar Mahdavi. These are well-known, well-committed to the country. We create a circle to create this bridge between these two de facto existence and sometimes to advise the UN how to work in Afghanistan, since the Afghans know much more better than any foreigners how to work in this country. That was and that is a very useful work, especially in the political aspect. We are advising the UNAMA political branch about the conferences about Afghanistan, like Oslo Forum or Doha 1, 2, 3. These are political work, and once in a while, I'm also asked by the foreign ministries and other ministries about question, economic or political, and I will try my best to give them as much as we can advice that could be helpful for the Afghan people. That's the main work that we are doing. I submitted two proposals to UNAMA and the de facto government by showing that we have a puzzle with three protagonists: the Afghan people, the Taliban regime, and the international community.
I mean, you have a history of acting as a bridge between people who you believe in and causes that you have worked for, and regimes that are not, shall we say, performing the way you believe that they should, politically and socially and economically. And twice since the Taliban came back to power, you have drawn up proposals that you have presented to Taliban figures and to figures in the international community in the hope of being a bridge for improvements in the situation in Afghanistan as it prevails. You did this earlier with Hisb Islami, and you're doing it again. The first one is almost exactly 2 years ago. You and I spoke about it, and I wrote a story about you and your ideas for Foreign Policy magazine. Can you go into the history of your first peace proposal for Afghanistan in the second era of the Taliban, and then we'll move on to your latest proposals.
Well, the first proposal was the 6 months after the collapse of Kabul. And at that time, I proposed to the Taliban the creation of a political commission council and an economic council inside Afghanistan in order to rule the country, because they are not aware of how to rule a modern country. And also the creation of a local districts council in order to make a decision a very horizontal way to come to the support of the people where they need and how to support them through this popular system. They created this council and it's working right now. But unfortunately, they started months after the creation, not a public popular council, but the Ulamas Council in the provinces, which is totally different of what I was submitted. Since it didn't work this way, we had also the problem with the international community, since we have three protagonists: the Afghan people, the Taliban regime, and the international community. And in my point of view, the demand of three protagonists are not contradictories. We may get together, put together all these demands in an international conference under the supervision of United Nations and to find solution for all demands, acceptable demands from three sides. The international community is asking for fighting against terrorism more seriously, to have a lawful system in Afghanistan to guarantee the human rights, and especially the women's rights, and a inclusive governance. And this is the international unanimity demand. The Taliban are asking for the recognition of their regime, for the withdrawal, removal of blacklist that they are under, and to free the Afghan assets, financial. So, and the Afghan people are asking just one thing: having a lawful system where every Afghan knows his right and his duty. I mean, a constitution. If Taliban are accepting the notion of creation of a elected, and I insist on elected, Islamic Council by the Afghan people who will write the Afghan constitution, the international, where we will have the guarantee of human rights, women's rights, and the guarantee in this constitution of Afghanistan free of any terrorist group from in the future. We will have a inclusive system, inclusive governance. Taliban could stay in the power for 1, 2, 3, 4 years until the new constitution come under function. We will fulfill the demand of international community and the demand of the Taliban regime and also the Afghan people. A lot of in the most important country in the world are agreeing with the system. Fortunately, we still have a unanimity of the entire world about their demands, which I mentioned. We are facing right now the resistance of this very close circle we mentioned previously inside Afghanistan. If we achieve to solve this problem, and it's what's on what I'm working right now, the Guwahati could be the beginning of such a process. Otherwise, I think we are facing three most dangerous crises in Afghanistan. The first one is very dangerous economic situation, a crisis of cultural crisis between tradition and modernity, and the legitimacy crisis. If we are not solving this through a international consensus, I'm unfortunately sure that the situation will become worse and worse if it continues like that.
I think, I mean, some people might say that you're being hopeful to the point of naivety in thinking that there would be some agreement from the Taliban leadership to some of these suggestions. Any election the Taliban is likely to lose. It's a minority regime. So why have elections? They don't want to. There is an entrenchment around the leadership in the way women are treated, and it seems that almost daily there are new restrictions on the lives and movement of women and girls. Most recently, women who are working in the administration have had their salaries standardised, as the word is, but really cut to the point of unsustainability. And the longer this situation prevails, the longer it is likely to prevail because it becomes more difficult to pull out of it. So, how How optimistic are you that you can get some level of agreement for change when the only change we see, especially from the outside, is regression?
If there is no hope, there is no fight, there is no life. So we should keep having these hopes. We have the choice among four options: fighting this regime militarily, isolating this regime more and more, recognize them as they are, or to be engaged with them. Among these four options, I think the entire international community choose to be engaged and to do not opt for the three other options. I'm working through this option chosen by the international community. Every time, every moment, try to find a solution, to propose something. If it doesn't work today, maybe tomorrow the situation will allow us to have some success. I had the same difficulties when I started the peace negotiation with the Ashraf Ghani regime. He told me 98% of Afghans and 98% of international community representative was not believing in such a process, in such peace deal. So there is no, in political life, impossible thing for a long term, which is something which is not possible today could become possible tomorrow. And Afghanistan is a very good witness of this impossibility and possibility since many decades. I'm hopeful. I think if there is no change, the economic situation will push millions of people to get out from Afghanistan or to start fighting against the situation, because the unique choice will be the starvation. If 10% of people who are facing the situation start kind of resistance, considering that this is because of this regime that they are facing this situation, the situation will be different and will be changing. And I think that will bring this regime to take under consideration the proposal of the people and to be somehow responsible in front of the people. The only economic situation could bring, unfortunately, but could push this regime to accept this change, to accept, be engaged with the international community, in this way to accept some legitimate demand of the international community. This is a possibility, and we are working for that. We
Well,
cannot
you
stay.
mentioned, go on.
We cannot stay in France. We said doing nothing and wait and see. We should work in any situation.
Yes, I understand that, and I very much respect your tenacity over the decades, really. But you mentioned before China. I spent a lot of time in China. I've visited North Korea a couple of times. These are the regimes that you're comparing the Taliban to. Um, Regimes that don't care about the hardships that they create and perpetuate for the general population. And my impression from outside is that you have a similar attitude amongst the Taliban. They have a lot of money, they make a lot of money, they keep a lot of money, and they don't care what's happening to the people below them. We have been hearing for many years, and certainly even before the collapse of the republic, that food security is an issue for the vast majority of Afghan people. Um, uh, but I don't see any tightened belts amongst the leadership, quite the contrary. So, would when you've got people who are doing okay, thanks, and really it's a self-serving bubble, versus people who are able to walk out of the country if they need to, rather than fight, because the Taliban now have the monopoly on firepower, um, and the people are exhausted with more than 40 years of war and now what's followed. Um, how can this possibly change? North Korea hasn't changed under pressure. The Chinese are just, battening down the hatches. Look at what's happening in Russia with the Putin regime also intensifying its grip on power. Um, the Taliban seem to me to be one of those regimes that doesn't care.
You're absolutely right, comparing the attitude, not the ideology of
Mm.
de facto regime with China and with North Korea. There is a difference, and the difference is the Afghan people culture. Nobody was believing that the Afghan people will defeat the Soviet Union invasion. Nobody. And it happened. And nobody was believing that the Afghan people would resist against this 50 countries, the most powerful countries, presence in Afghanistan. It happened. Afghan people has another culture. They are very, maybe unfortunately, but this is the case. They are very easily ready to fight and to resist. It's true that maybe millions of people will try to leave the country only because their girls could not go to the school. And every day they had problem with their girls. So if they had the possibility, they will leave the country. But other millions will say it's the fault of Taliban. If we are in this situation, economic situation, it is because of this regime. So despite dying with the lack of food, let's fight and die with the gun in your hand. This is our culture. And 10% of these people will be enough to create this change, which I does not wish for. I'm totally against any kind of violence. But see what happened 2 weeks ago in Badakhshan. People started to resist for a good or bad reason. Look what happened in Nangarhar 2 weeks ago. Many
Yeah.
people has been shot. That will happen more and more if there is no change. That's not something that I wish I work for. I wanted to work peacefully, but if there is no a reasonable position from the de facto regime, that may happen, and very soon that what that may I may believe in.
Well, that's a frightening thought, more war. And you do have groups outside the country who are waiting for the opportunity. There are quite a few of them, militarized and militant organizations that do, I think, look for the opportunity that you're speaking of, uprisings that can then take on a momentum that leads to more war. A terrible prospect, but you're talking in your latest, your most recent proposal. You also talk about another Doha meeting, but Doha one, if you like, is dead in the water, and neither side has kept to the obligations that the deal committed them to. And we know from successive reports by the United Nations Security Council sanctions monitoring team that Taliban defiance has transformed Afghanistan once again into a safe haven for terrorist and jihadist groups. And they're not only getting away with it, but they're being paid, as some people view it, handsomely for it by Western taxpayers, amongst whom I count both you and I. And so this getting away with it may mean that the Taliban don't see the signs of Badakhshan, Nangarhar, these are signs, as you see them, of a growing resentment and dissatisfaction and need for improvement and change. If the Taliban, like children, are getting away with their extremes and their abuses, why would they change?
There's something very surprising for many people, which is the United States is sending billions of dollars since 2, 3 years to Afghanistan, officially and probably unofficially. And there is more than $200 million monthly going to Afghanistan. It means that the international community and taxpayers like you and me have the power to have some influence and to play a role for changing the situation in this country. Unfortunately, I'm convinced that United States, in absence of any less bad or better alternative, is keeping this regime under what we call the serum, to be just alive, but just be alive, not be very well positioned. If there is no change in this policy from United States and Western country, and unfortunately with the start of this protagonism between Russia, China, and United States, everyone want to have Afghanistan on their side, we may face a very bad situation than today. But we have the chance to work with our countries and Western free countries with the politician to change this policy of support of the situation and to have this, to keep this standby situation for Afghanistan. They are keeping this country in a standby, and this is their policy right now.
Yes, I understand that, and there is no reason to think in any other way. Um, but the impunity with which the Taliban are able to operate is really quite shocking, um, but understandable in that attention is diverted by the war in Ukraine and now what's going on in the Middle East. Um, Somebody on Twitter I noticed the other day said, what if somebody came to Tom West's place, knocked on the door and said, none of the women in your family are allowed to go to school or work or leave their homes anymore? How would he react? I think that this affects me. It affects your daughter. It affects women all over the world because it is happening with impunity in one part of the world. I just am unable to understand it, to be honest with you. And yet, I have been told by editors that I work for that no one's interested in Afghanistan anymore. I can't believe that that's true. Do you?
I heard from Taliban responsible delegation something very surprising. They told me, you are talking about women rights in our negotiation of our other values. It's absolutely not what the United States are asking us in our private negotiation. What they are asking us is to be not too close to China, to do not give the lithium mines to China or Russia. This is what they are asking. 2 weeks ago, the spokesman of Foreign Affairs in Washington said they continue for the national interest of United States dealing with the de facto regime in Afghanistan. So unfortunately, and that's very sad, they are practicing what Samuel Huntington said in Clash of Civilization: do not care about values, do care about your national interest. This is exactly what we are witnessing right now. And until a change of this policy, we may be in a very dark situation, unfortunately.
Well, indeed. Just a final question, not a particularly nice one, I mean, but I'm interested to know from you how long you think that the current situation can prevail before it becomes irreversible, especially for children, because girls are not going to school, but boys who are going to school are not being educated, let's face it. How long have we got before a country is lost?
I hope as short as possible. But being realistic, I think it will take at least 2 3 years, and it depends also on many factors: how the Ukraine war will be solved, how the Middle East will, or how this relationship between China, Russia, United States will grow up. These are outside factors, but from inside, we are witnessing a pre-unrest situation inside the country. People are not uh, hopeful about the near future of this country with this de facto government. There are steps. Uh, Maybe next step will be the hunger, and the next step may be resistance, and the next step would be violence. When, how, it depends on so many factors that it's impossible to predict right now. But this is the way, unfortunately, that we are going through. If things goes like that.
Yes, indeed. Well, Amin Karim, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you as always, and um, I, I, I wish you the best of luck with everything that you do and everything that you propose in trying to improve the situation for Afghanistan and the people of Afghanistan. Thank you.
Thank you so much to you. I know since a decade you're working in Afghanistan for the sake of Afghan people. You always defended the freedom of these people. And I'm very thankful and grateful to you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. And please excuse me for my so broken English. Thank you so much.
Not at all. It's a joy. Thank you. That was Amin Karim, a politician and tenacious campaigner for constitutional normality in Afghanistan. He talked about the difficulties that people in Afghanistan have been facing for many years, not just since the Taliban takeover 3 years ago, and his hopes that the extremists can accept change and compromise if Afghanistan is to have a prosperous and peaceful future. I hope you enjoyed our discussion. Until next time, I'm Lynne O'Donnell. Bye-bye.